Mrs. DeMar, my name is Javon Davis. I am an attorney with the Florida District Attorney's Office and charged with continuing our recording of your expert testimony in the case of the people of Florida versus Jodi Arias. Do you understand why we're here today?
Yes, I understand.
Great. Before we begin, if you could please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. Mrs. DeMar, in continuance with yesterday's session, would you please explain to the jury some details about borderline personality disorder and inappropriate intense anger, as you described in the profile you established of Mrs. Arias?
Certainly. So, people suffering from this particular personality disorder tend to suffer from a lot of aggressiveness, hostility, and defensiveness. But at the same time, on a day-to-day basis, they really do a good job of not displaying all these things to other people. In other words, this isn't a person that is going around being hostile all the time or doing things such as throwing things or kicking a wall or slamming a door, things that are observable. But they're still experiencing all these emotions on the inside and very intensely so. Now, also, there are times when people suffering from this disorder feel like they have been wronged by somebody or that somebody has hurt them in some way. But for the most part, they really perceive this to be the case, when in reality, that's not true at all. And that's why it's so very difficult to see warning signs, if you will. Now, in psychological terms, unfortunately, it's a rather colloquial term. We really just describe this as violent outbursts. Somebody could be seething inside and just being really, really angry. And again, the problem is that while these feelings are going on in the inside, it's almost impossible for the normal person to detect that there is something going on because they appear to be just fine and so normal.
And signs for this are not immediately visible to the outside person?
Yes, that's correct. And that's exactly why it is so difficult to detect serious problems before they happen. When people suffering from this disorder get really, really angry, what the profile suggests is that they tend to externalize blame, and in doing so, basically justifying their actions. So you might have somebody who's saying, this isn't my fault. I didn't do this because I have all these emotions inside of me. I did this because somebody did something to me. And that's how they're able to conceptualize it and put the blame elsewhere.
Now, in the case of Jodi Arias, when you conducted your preliminary evaluation, what were your initial findings?
When I first reviewed the records, there was a strong indication of a very high degree of immaturity that was present.
Can you give us some specific examples?
Yes. So, for example, I reviewed Ms. Arias' booking profile and noticed the way that she had taken the booking picture. She was smiling, and it looked more like she had taken a picture for a high school yearbook and not a booking picture. Clearly with her behavior not matching the seriousness of the situation at all, which I found strange and immature. There was also testimony in her file, among other things from her parents, who had said that after visiting her in jail, that she had told them that she was happy as hell and acted accordingly. Another example of how the perceived situation and the reality did not match up at all. It was behaviors like this that made me first feel like they were aberrant, and made me also wonder if there was some sort of an intellectual deficit that was a contributing factor in the situation. So, following the review of her files and describing the findings, which I have just outlined to the court, I then decided to administer an intelligence test and the results allowed me to very clearly diagnose her on Axis 2 as borderline personality disorder, as indicated in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic and statistical manual for mental disorders.
What does that mean?
So, in people who suffer from borderline personality disorder, what you can think of is what we frequently see in teenagers, and that is a very high level of immaturity or emotional ability, or in this particular case, the lack thereof. Generally speaking, it's about instability. It's about instability of personal relationships, instability of emotions, instability of self. These people are frequently asking themselves, who am I as a person? And is exactly this distortion of self that can be so severe that it interferes with everyday functioning. These people may not be able to go to work or to school or maintain healthy relationships like you and I would. There may be also episodes of aggression. There may be instances of injury, self-injury or injury to others. We're talking about possible substance abuse, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, that sort of thing. Also, as far as emotions are concerned, there is a great amount of fluctuation going on. The person may be happy one moment and sad the next and angry the next, and all this can happen within a span of either a few moments or throughout the day. It just really depends on the situation. Now, in Ms. Arias' case, she has a very long history of also overstepping boundaries. There is a lot of testimony in her case file. For example, one of her former boyfriends, Mr. Alexander, has testified previously that Ms. Arias has gone onto his Facebook page and into his cell phone through his contact list and text messages without his permission. And it's exactly these kind of behaviors that say, please stay with me, I need to see what's going on, that create this disconnect between what is intended and how it is perceived with the other person. That creates this internal anger and anxiety and the buildup into this seething anger that I have talked about previously.
All right, I think that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.